Buckle up. It's guaranteed to be a wild ride. Welcome to Musicians and Beyond's special multi-part series, Under the Covers with Ernie Cefalu. Your hosts, John Surabian and Mark Lawhorne, are going to expose the history-making journey of this iconic figure and his contributions to the music and corporate world. Mark, this is awesome.
This is going to be another fun one. I enjoyed the episode 28 that we did with Ernie, and doing this multi-part series is really going to give the audience a really great background in how this world works, how Ernie's life has been, and it's a very fascinating and exciting story to hear, especially from the storyteller himself.
Absolutely. So let's get going with part one of Under the Covers. Ernie Cefalu.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Fantastic, Ernie.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And, I'm truly humbled by the opportunity. It's been kind of a crazy 52-year career, and, for it to start culminating at 77, it's, and it's really, for me, it's very convincing. It helps me understand that why I'm still doing what I do. I love what I do. I've always loved it. From the beginning, as you can see from the pictures behind me, I was born on income tax day, 1945, and it was a great, I guess, my parents talked about, sometimes it was a good refund from the government. Sometimes it was a bad thing on that tax day. But, I was very, very blessed to have great parents and come from a great family of Italians who actually came here at the turn of the century. With my mother was born on the boat coming over from Calabria, and my dad came from Sicily. And in those days, all the Italians were crooks and all the Irish were cops. And so there was a lot of craziness going on then. But I was born in Milwaukee, and I have, like I said, both families. In my family, my mother and her two sisters married my father and his two brothers. So it was kind of like an Italian deliverance, but instead of an accordion or a banjo, they had an accordion, and so I had these double first cousins, where our mothers are sisters and our fathers were brothers. I mean, it's
That's
crazy. But when you think about the time, that's really what, people did. You didn't really marry outside of the family, whether you were Irish or Italian or, Asian or American Indian, whatever. Everybody kind of stayed in their own space. And, and I was very lucky to have a family that was pretty open-minded, even though they were Italians, heavy Italians on both sides. When I brought my wife home as my girlfriend, my mother tried to overdose on raviolis because she was a blonde. She was not Catholic. I mean, it's great, but we'll talk about all that later on, because my mother always wanted me to marry an Italian girl. It was kind of arranged like that. My uncle married my uncle who met my aunt. They got together, they got married, and at their wedding, the other two brothers and sisters met and they got married. So it was like this crazy thing. And all of a sudden I come home with this blonde, blue-eyed, very pale woman who, my mother, like I said, it was pretty amazing to watch her react to it. But, she knew, even as how weird as it was for her to accept that, because I was really the first one out of my family. I mean, even, dating, she would set up these dates with Italian girls, because what happened was a lot of the family moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. In 1950, my uncle was the first one to come out here in 46. He was a plumber. Track homes, the war is over, vets are coming back. They're building track homes. Track homes became a big thing. And my dad and mom had moved us to Florida. And my uncle, his brother, kept hounding him. You should come out to California, come out, because the building industry is going crazy. And, they were flipping houses. They were buying houses in the 50s for like $5,000 and $6,000 and doing the plumbing, doing the carpeting and flipping it, and it was crazy how they were very much ahead of their time and plugged into what they were doing. They were craftsmen. And, you know, I picked up a lot of my love for what I did from my dad. My dad was a master carpenter, cabinet maker. He was a finish carpenter. And, you know, all through high school, as you see the picture down over here, I had really just played around with art. In elementary school, you know, everybody draws. And then you become like the best one, you know, and then junior high school was kind of the same for me. I had gone to a junior high school that was just a block or so away, and from where I lived, and all my friends, and you know, I got into art because it was very easy for me. You know, I kind of always loved it. As a kid, I would wait for the Sunday paper to come, and I would sit there and draw Bugs Bunny and you know, Porky Pig and Donald Duck all day long, while my dad read the rest of the paper. I would take the comic strips, but you know, it was something that I always loved to do. And in high school, you know, and each time we're all kind of equal. I mean, everybody drew in elementary school, everybody drew in junior high school. And then when you come to high school, it's a little bit different because they separate you from, you have in elementary school and even in junior high school, you start getting it where you're going to different classes with different kids. It's not the same room all day long with the same kids. So junior high school became a little more competitive, you know, because it sort of filtered down the people that really wanted to do art versus the people that everybody did art. And then when I went to high school, from junior high school, I had spent 3 years in junior high school becoming the best artist. And then I go to high school, and there's art classes where people were really interested in being artists. And so I found myself, you know, competing again, starting out with you know, I'm a freshman, and there's juniors and seniors who are already years ahead of me doing art. And so you have to sort of get over the fact that you were once the best and now you're just another one, you know. And so you have to sort of become the best. And I always, you know, well, I didn't sit there and think out loud to myself, well, I'm going to be the best. I just focused on what I love to do, and actually what came easiest for me. You know, art was always it was a good place to run and hide, okay, from everything else that was going on, whether it was girls or, you know, cars or just getting in trouble. Art was always a refuge for me. And, you know, it was kind of like that in all the way along, even in college. But in high school, I had a very good high school teacher who really sort of took me under his wing. But talking about mentors, jump back to elementary school when, you know, I spent more time in the principal's office than I did in class with my schoolmates. You know, I was always in trouble. And so at a certain point, they call my parents in, and I'm in the principal's office. There's me, the principal, my parents, and Sister Mary Lucidi. And Sister Mary Lucidi was probably about 700 years old at that point. And this is the early 50s. But she had so much belief in me. She was my third grade teacher, and I'll never forget her. And I mean, she was ancient, but she was smart enough to see that there was kind of a talent there that needed to be, you know, really looked into. And when my parents were in that office, I remember my mom was like a basket case, you know, and it was just, you know, they were expecting it, you know, it was no surprise. And, you know, they didn't know what to do. What do we do? What do we do? And Sister Mary Lucy, I'll never forget it. She said, your son has an extraordinary talent for art and love for art. You should try and help him with that. Okay. And I'll never forget that. I mean, she was the first person, you know, outside of a family member that said, oh, you really have some talent. You know, I always dabbled around. My dad was a carpenter. My mother was a homemaker. There was me and my brother. And, you know, she loved music. She was always in the kitchen. I remember she had a radio on the windowsill, and she used to play music and dance around while she was making lunch and dinner or whatever. I mean, she was a beautiful, beautiful woman who had a lot of love for music. And I think that's kind of where I got the love for music, from her. She would grab me and dance around, and, she came from the 30s and 40s, and my dad was a carpenter. That's what he did. And when he wasn't working, he had built a 3-car garage. He tore down a 1-car garage and built a 3-car garage so that he could build cabinets and stuff for freelance jobs. He was always freelancing, even though he was a contractor's employee. On the side, he would build cabinets, he would remodel kitchens. Him and my uncle were flipping houses. I mean, he was always working. So my work ethic came from him. I never realized it until later on in my life how I had picked that up from him. I mean, it was amazing. I remember as a kid, my mother, to get rid of one of us, she would send us to work with, in the summertime. So she would send me to work with my dad, and, he would have me cleaning up and sweeping up whatever they're doing. And the main thing was getting bent nails and straightening them out, with a hammer, and sitting there and tapping them and putting them in jars and stuff, because he was coming from the Depression and, all that stuff. I mean, it was, for him, those were valuable things that needed to be reused. And so again, I picked up a lot of my work ethic and love for what I did, from him. And, in high school, I remember I worked, actually, I joined Bulldog Studio. Our mascot was the Bulldog, San Jose High School. And I joined the studio that was the art studio for all the stuff, all the art that was needed in the high school, whether it was a school play, whether it was somebody running for president of the class. We did all the posters and stuff. And so I kind of really, really gravitated toward that. My other work, I mean, I wasn't really that good a student. I really didn't have a lot of love for it. It's really funny because I want to back up for just a second. And we had talked about this before. When I was in junior high school, I was just starting. I think it was in the 7th grade. And I was really hyped on being an artist. And I did one of those Draw Me, those matchbook covers that would come, and they'd have a woman's profile or whatever, and it'd draw me, and you mail it in to some place in Wisconsin or something. And they would tell you if you had any talent. Well, I did that. And they sent a guy out. Obviously, it was a local sales guy that was representing them, to get people to sign up their kids. And so I remember, I wanted to do that. I thought this was going to be the start of, being an artist. And here's this guy that comes out here, and he's telling my parents how good I drew and how, so much I could learn, and what a great career it would be. And they kind of knew that I loved art anyway. So they asked me, will you do this? Because it wasn't cheap. I don't know exactly the amount, but it was a lot. My dad made $200 a week. I mean, he was making millions of dollars. I mean, it was hard work, and, he really, wasn't rolling in the money, but he wanted to believe and help me as his oldest son. And so I committed to them, saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. So they signed me up, and they sent me, the guy went away, and a week or two later, I get this box, and it's got a drawing board. It's got a compass. It's got a pencil sharpener. It's got some pencils, and it's got this T-square. And I showed you guys this before. This is my T-square. This is the T-square that came with all the other art materials, okay? And I still use this T-square to this day. I don't do anything really on computer. I do everything old school. And
it has a pretty special meaning to you.
It does. It does. It is a reminder for me of the love that my parents had for me and the success they wanted me to have in my life. And they made a commitment. They made a pretty heavy commitment. I mean, they didn't have a lot of money to throw around. And so they did it. And it's funny because they sent me the first course, and I did it, and I sent it back. And by the time it got back to me with their input, I discovered girls. And girls were pretty amazing, man. They were different than guys. You stop not liking girls to liking girls, you know, and for me, that was like a real epiphany. It's like, okay, you know, it's, you know, sixth, seventh grade, I'm starting to understand girls and cars, how important cars were. You know, I grew up in San Jose. That was like American graffiti. You know, it was like, it was all about cars and older people that you wanted to hang out with. I mean, well, I remember being 14 and I'm hanging around with guys that are 16 and 17 that drive. And, you know, my parents were kind of freaking out about that because I was a kid. I had, you know, had a bicycle and these guys had cars, and why are they hanging around with me? You know, and why do I want to hang around with them? And so there was that whole thing going on there. And so by the time I got the second or third installment on this commitment that I had made to my parents that they financially made to this company, I wasn't interested anymore. You know, I was more interested in girls and cars, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I stuck them with it. You know, they ended up having to pay. I think they may have got out of it, but it still cost quite a bit. And so I never ever stopped using this T-square because it reminds me of the commitment they made for me and how important it was for me to really, and again, it didn't dawn on me till years later. I mean, there were a few years that I didn't use it and I found it. I went through some stuff and I found it, and it's like, oh my God, it had a whole different meaning to me then. You know, my dad worked very hard, you know, to raise two sons, and, you know, for him to just get stuck with that, something that I didn't really come to appreciate so much until years later. But again, it never left my side. And I like I said, I still use it to this day. I'll sit there and do my sketching. You know, I don't really do a lot of finished art anymore because I have someone that does that for me, an old friend that we worked together for years. And so he's an amazing computer designer, and we work together like two, you know, peas and carrots. Yeah. So that was kind of what was going on. And in high school, I, again, being part of Bulldog Studio and doing all this stuff, I became really good at what I did at that point. And so by the time I graduated, I didn't really plan on going to college. I mean, I wasn't prepared for college. I mean, I was lucky because of the art and boys foods, which I took a couple semesters. You know, I was able to get through high school. My grades were just probably C's. I remember seeing a couple of old report cards as a kid, and it wasn't real glamorous, you know, and my parents really were worried, you know. And so I graduated high school, and like I said, by this time I had a 57 Chevy. So I was, you know, spending all my time polishing my car and you know, I had no skill. So, and it was summertime. So none of my friends that I graduated with were working that hard yet. And so we spent all summer cruising to Maine. It was just like American Graffiti, you know, and then, you know, summer was over and most of my friends went to work. They were in construction, they were doing this, they were doing that. They went to school. Not very many of them went to college. And if they did, it was city college. Nobody really was planning. I mean, at least the people that I hung out with. And you know, one guy was an incredible mechanic and he had the fastest car in school. And so we would hang out and it was all about that, you know, drag racing on the weekends and stuff and dragging the Maine. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't really have any skills. And so I decided, myself and a few friends went and saw The Great Escape with Steve McQueen, and they're in a Nazi prisoner of war camp, and you know, they break away and he's got a motorcycle and he's doing all this riding in the hills in Germany and stuff, and we're like, yeah, we want to go, let's go in the army and we can go overseas and ride motorcycles and stuff. And so I remember getting ready to go to the physical for signing up to enlist. And we were going to sign up. There was 5 of us. We were going to sign up for 4 years and really find ourselves. And my cousin, Bill, who had always been my idol. He's like 5 years older than me. And I always looked up to him. And he was like the Fonz, you know, we were all like, you know, we would look up to him and follow him around at group gatherings and stuff. We were like goldfish poop. You ever watch a goldfish poop? It just follows them in the tank. And all those kids were like goldfish
Great
poop.
visual.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like that, and I remember, I guess my mom had talked to him because we were ready to go. And he had already joined a reserve unit. And so he came, and this is like 1963. And he came over and talked to me and said, look, I suggest you really think about what you're going to do. I know your friends you're all hyped about going and doing that, but I'll tell you what, why don't you come down to my reserve unit, meet the guys, and check it out? Because if you go in for 6 months and you decide you love it and you want to do it, you can re-up, and they'll give you extra money, and they'll give you a choice of what you want to be and all that stuff. And it seemed to make sense, because when you're 4 years seemed like a long time, but it didn't seem like forever, but maybe it's a better way to put your toe in the water, and I'm so glad and so grateful him to this day. I thank him still for suggesting that, because I mean, it was, when I went in, I signed up, and then I went in, I did my I went into active duty, went through my, training and stuff at Fort Ord in Monterey. And right around the time I had joined, Kennedy was assassinated, and everybody knew that we were going to war. They thought it was going to be with Russia. And here I am in the Army, and it's like, man, this doesn't look good. Well, it turned out that it wasn't Russia or whatever, and nobody went to war yet. But a month or a year or so later, Vietnam broke out, and all the reserve units closed up. And you couldn't, there's no way you had to go to Vietnam, Canada, or B4F. And the guys that I was going to sign up with 4 years, they all went, and every one of them flunked the physical. So I would have been the only one that would have passed the physical and gone by myself. So it's just funny how things kind of happen that way, right? And so, I was in the reserves, and I still had no vocation, but, I decided that 6 months in the Army really straightened me out. It made me understand that I needed to do something with my life. I needed to do more than just drag the mane and hang out and wait for my buddies to get off work. I needed to do something. And I didn't really know how to do anything except draw. And so what I did was I put together a portfolio, and I went to Oakland. There was a small college, art college, an accredited college called California College of Arts and Crafts. And it was on an old estate in Oakland, up at the top of Oakland. Oakland is a really cool place, because before Montclair and the hills, you could see down from my college campus, you could see down to Jack London Square, which was at the other end of Oakland, where the water was and stuff, in Jack London Square. And this campus was an old estate that these rich people had given, Treadwell was their names, and they gave it to the school. And so the school made classrooms out of carriage houses and barns. And the main house, Treadwell Hall, was the estate. It was on I'd say it was about 2 acres. And the campus itself, Treadwell Hall, was the main house that was the estate. Then there was these carriage houses and barns and makeshift things, and they put in a cafeteria. And they built a building at one end of the campus, and the rest of the campus looked like, I don't know whether you ever saw the movie with Katharine Hepburn and Elizabeth Taylor, Suddenly Last Summer.
I did not.
Okay, well, Katharine Hepburn's yard, her estate yard, looked like something out of prehistoric times, with all these very strange, flowers and plants and crazy stuff. And that was our campus, and so we spent a lot of time outside drawing classes, drawing different foliage and stuff like that. I mean, it was I had a jewelry class in a carriage house. I had a design class in a barn, and again, it was an environment that was comfortable, going into, oh yeah, I'm an artist. I'm best in high school, and now I'm going to go to art college. This is going to be great. I got accepted on double, triple probation because my academic grades were really low. I mean, C's. It was never really. But all my art was A's and A pluses. I mean, that's really what got me through. Like I said, high school was boys' foods. I took that 2 semesters with this crazy woman that was a cook, like what's her name, Julia Childs. I think she was hitting a bottle in the back, and all you could do to put up with all these crazy high school kids that couldn't pass anything else but boys' foods. I mean, how hard is it to pass boys' foods? So I'm sure she would, and she was great. She put up with this. But anyway, now I'm in art school. I'm on double, triple probation. And I'm commuting from San Jose to Oakland, which is about a 35-minute drive every day to different classes. And the most shocking thing was that now I'm in a school where everybody is an artist. Okay. Nobody's there to be a mathematician. Nobody's there to be a historian. Nobody's really, doing anything other than being art. And so it's the best of the best. And for me, that was really kind of a shocker, because I expected to come in, best in high school and all that stuff. I mean, how hard could it be for me to really become the best in this? Yet I didn't really understand that everybody is going to be there for the same thing I'm there for. So now it's a different scenario. It's a different situation. And boy, oh boy, I mean, I'm, again, as a freshman, looking at juniors and seniors who are creating artwork that's just amazing, because they had a whole area in Treadwell Hall where they would put up students' work, and I mean, and as a newcomer there, as a freshman, they would give you a tour of the campus, and they would give you, what's that?
Oh,
Hitting the bottle. You must have been a high school art whole foods teacher.
Listen, when you have someone telling stories, you got to have something to sip on and listen.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not stealing the show here.
No, we love him.
Have you guys any questions? All right, that's what I'm talking about.
I want to remind our listeners that they're listening to Musicians and Beyond, and this is our special series called Under the Covers with Ernie Cefalu.
Yeah, that's me. I know that guy.
He's the best.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
While we have Ernie here on the podcast with us, Ernie is recounting his years and his youthful influences as he grew up. His parents had a huge impact on him, and he went on through high school and on to college. And while Ernie tells us the stories, because we could just sit here and listen for days, you always have to have something to sip on. So right now we have a little of Elijah Craig.
Nice.
And I'm
going to do mine during the break.
I like it. Then we have a little bit of coquito from Puerto Rico.
Oh, nice.
A Puerto Rican eggnog. So we have a little something to keep us in the holiday spirits while we listen.
Spirits. That's great. That's awesome. And John, I hope you're doing it as well.
Yes,
Not
sir.
just Mark. Okay, that's good.
No,
I'll do mine when I'll come back and my eyes will look like somebody's been throwing rocks at them, but so it is kind of a interesting, I mean, there isn't a whole lot of art to talk about yet, but all of this is leading up to something that's pretty amazing. And nobody was more amazed than me at where it went, because I never expected for it to be, even when I started art school, it was like, I did it because I had to do something. I'm right out of the Army. I'm still going to reserve meetings and stuff, but I needed to do something. I needed to make something out of my life. I'm 18, 19. I just feel like everybody else is doing something. I need to do something,
Ernie, so you said something a minute ago that there's not a lot of art so far, at this point in the story, but it is about your early influences that led you to where you went to. And it is about your parents who had such a strong impact on your life and your work and your ethic and your discipline. So it is important for people to realize where these things, as you said a minute ago, you didn't realize the impact of something that your parents gave you so many years ago until you found it years later.
Yeah.
So
and it makes you think about
the groundwork.
You don't think about it. You may not have thought about it at the moment, or maybe you did and didn't give it enough thought, and there was even a point, if I can back up to go forward here for a second. Please. When I got out of school, I decided that maybe I should be a carpenter. Okay, maybe I should be a carpenter. I work with my dad. I go get him tools while he's doing something, and and I maybe that's what I needed to do. So I talked it over with him, and I got to tell you honestly, I think it was probably one of the proudest moments in his life that I remember growing up, when he took me down to the Carpenters Union, and I met all the guys, that are there waiting to go out on the jobs and stuff. And my dad worked for a contractor, Kirkish. I'll never forget it. And he was his top carpenter. And he took me down to the Carpenters Union, and I signed up, to be a carpenter. And then our next door neighbor, Joe Graglia, was a contractor who had built the house we lived in San Jose, built his house, and was an independent contractor building custom homes. So he got me a job as an apprentice with Joe Graglia, okay, our neighbor. And I think as I look back on it, I think that my dad knew that my heart wasn't going to be in being a carpenter. Even though I swore to him, this is really what I want to take your tools and become the next generation of carpenter, and somebody you'll be proud of in what you do, and see that I can master it. And I think that him and Joe cooked up a scheme to hire me, because he hired me right away. As soon as I signed up the union, I got a job the next day. And Joe Graglia and he, I think, planned to make my life miserable so that I would really follow my heart. I think my dad was smart enough to know that. And I remember every morning when I went to work, I would walk the next house over to meet Joe. He'd have his truck parked there, and he'd make me stand at attention and read the door of his truck. Joseph J. Graglia, a general contractor. Okay, and then his number. And he would say, now you see, I'm the general and you're the private, and you need to do everything that I tell you to do. And we did that every morning. So for 3 months, I was digging foundation. I was laying subfloor. I would come home, my hands were totally blistered and bleeding. And he just made my life miserable, to the point where I went to my dad and said, I just can't do this. I'm not, I don't. And meanwhile, my dad's got beams and he's walking across roofing and stuff. I mean, he had no fear. It was amazing, hanging off stiff, nailing shit upside down. I mean, it was crazy. And I'm like crawling along, right? Just scared to death. And I finally went to him and said, I can't do this. And I think that was probably the saddest day in his life. Okay. When his oldest son, just couldn't do it. But I did say to him, I want to be an artist. All this has made me understand that I want to be an artist. My heart is really an art. And even though he never forgot this, okay, he said to me, is it really what you want to do? Is it really what he never said, well, you stuck me and your mom with all the costs of that, and you said you're going to do it, and then you go off and get a car and girls, and you forgot all about this. Meanwhile, we were still paying for it. He never said that. My mom never said it. My mom didn't have to say it. My mom would just look at me. Okay. And I would know exactly what she was thinking. I was exactly like her. My mother was crazy. She was wild. Her father owned a grocery store, and she would steal apples from the lady down the street because they tasted better than the apples in her dad's store. Okay. And she had a big scar on her arm where she was impaled on the woman's fence when the woman caught her up in the tree and she fell down. And I mean, she was a piece of work, and I was just like her. So she didn't have to say anything. She just look at me and say, I knew I had to, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to talk them into doing this again, I'm going to convince them. I'm going to sell my 57 Chevy. And because I had a beautiful Bel Air 2-door hardtop, man, it was awesome. 4-speed on the floor. It was great. And I sold it, got a Pontiac that I could drive back and forth to Oakland in, and put together a portfolio and went to this interview. And they accepted me, like I said, on double secret probation. And my first semester was very, very hard because I was commuting 30 minutes and sometimes more in traffic from San Jose to Oakland, and then try and go back. And then I'd go back home, and guess what? All my buddies were off work, and let's go drag the main. Let's go do. So I'd be out there doing that instead of doing homework. Okay, so here I am, and basically doing the same stuff. So, if I wanted to change anything, and after my first semester, I mean, I was just hanging on by the skin of my teeth. And so I decided that I was going to move to Oakland, and I had made friends there were 3 Asian kids. One was Japanese, the other 2 were Chinese. And say what you will about, things about different races. These guys were committed. They were there to be artists. They weren't there to mess around. They weren't there to get high. They weren't there to party. They were there. I mean, they would wake me up and say, did you do your homework? Did you do this? Did you get this done? And thank God for them, because if it hadn't been for them, I would have probably flunked out. So all of a sudden, my next semester, I'm like on the honor roll list, I mean, I'm doing really well. The only problem was I couldn't decide what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an artist, but the school that I went to, unlike most art schools like Art Center or a couple of these other ones, specialized in a specific form. Like Art Center was really mainly for car designers and advertising agencies. They had a couple of fine art classes because they had to, but their main focus was producing designers and artists for Madison Avenue or for General Motors. They were sponsored by the big 3 automotive companies, because probably 80% of the car designers came out of Art Center. In fact, a kid that I went to high school, Ed Roth, went to, not Ed Roth. He went to work for Ed Roth. What the hell was his name? I went to school with a kid that ended up working for Big Daddy Ed Roth and designed a bunch of cars for him, the Rat Fink and all that stuff. He was working with him, and he had graduated Art Center. But I didn't want to move away to LA. I wanted something local, and arts and crafts was that, So, I after having these 3 roommates for 2 or 3 semesters, actually, I think we were roommates for about 3 years, 2 years, 2.5 years. And then I went off, got a couple other different roommates, and, moved on. But by that time, it really had instilled in me the reason why I was there. And it wasn't cheap. I mean, it was in those days, it would sound cheap today, but it was expensive. And again, my parents ponied up the money, and, these guys made me realize that, hey, your parents are paying for this. You better, reciprocate, at least get an education, do something. So by this time, I'm probably in my junior year, and I had bounced around. I took a jewelry class. I wanted to be a jeweler. Okay. Then I took a ceramics class. I wanted to throw pots and stuff. Then I took a design class. I had taken some basic design classes, and I was really good at it. I took a rendering class that, you'd sit there and render feathers or artichoke. I have a big 6-foot artichoke I painted, from a little one that I had done for class, and actually turned it in a year or so later for extra credit. That was the cool thing about going to art school. Everything was geared for the artist. Okay, I had English. It's an accredited college, but it was English about art, mathematics, art, the way you compose compositions and stuff mathematically. History was art history, so everything was based on the artist. And if you didn't do so well on a test or something, you could hand in an art piece and get extra credit. So you could move an F up to like a C+. But if you're really good, you could move it to like maybe a B- or something. So, it was real. Michael McClure, I don't know whether you're familiar with him. He was a poet. He was also a Hell's Angel. He did The Beard. He was in Candy, the movie. Richard Burton played his part in Candy. He was best friends with Ferlinghetti and Ginsberg, and Dylan, all these people. He was also a Hell's Angel. He used to wear his colors to class and had a knucklehead Harley that he would drive to school and park in the parking lot. It was amazing. Our teachers were artists themselves. They weren't just people teaching it. They were accredited, Ron Dahl, very famous painter and artist, was one of my teachers, and like I said, Michael McClure, and philosophy was all about artists and how they looked at life and stuff. So everything was geared toward the artist, and it made it a lot easier for me because academics were never a strong suit for me. Art, I always excelled. I never got less than an A in 4 years of college. Okay, in art. Other classes, well, I could move an F to a C plus, keep that grade point up there, and make sure I take plenty of art classes, So in my junior year, I had come to the realization that if I wanted to make any money at this, I needed to be in advertising because I was a painter, yeah, but a crappy painter. I was I was a jeweler, but there were so many other people that were better, but the one thing that I was really strong in was design. So I decided that I was going to make advertising my career, and I switched my major for the last time in the beginning of my junior year, and beefed up on the advertising classes, and I entered a contest. This is a picture of myself in my junior year of college with the mayor of San Pablo. San Pablo was a small city in California, Northern California. And they had decided that the city council had opened up a contest to design the logo for the city of San Pablo. And so I'm thinking, well, and by this point, I'm looking now to freelancing, okay, and getting as much work as I could that was professional, more than just, I had plenty of art projects, okay, but you kind of knew they were art projects, but the trick was to try and make them look as real as you could so that you could put them in a portfolio and you might be able to fool an employer, a future employer, that it was really something. So there was plenty of that, but I needed, if I'm going to go to New York, and when I decided I was going to make advertising a career, the only place to go was New York. Even though I was freelancing in San Francisco and Oakland, I worked on Walter Lander's ferry boat for Dixie Corporation doing, cups and plates and stuff. And, I told you before that working on the boat was like this because it's in the pier in San Francisco Harbor and it's rolling with the tide. So you're there at a design table and you're doing this all day long. So it was kind of interesting, but I was able to get some work. And this opportunity with the city of San Pablo, that would be something if I could even get a runner-up or something. So I designed a logo and I submitted it. There was 2,000 submissions and I won. I couldn't believe it. It was like the first time that anything like that had ever happened. I mean, I was painting, one of the things that we had talked about before was I made some extra money during the holidays painting gas station windows and store windows, and sometimes poster signs that said, green beans, 35 cents a pound, and they would put them up in the store, and so I made some extra money like that. But this was an opportunity to really sort of compete. I didn't realize, if I would have realized there were going to be so many people that entered, I probably would have not. But at this point, I didn't realize there were going to be so many. And, quite honestly, screw it. What do you got to lose?
Right.
Got to give it a shot.
So the corporate part is going to be a whole nother part of your life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know what? The corporate part, it started with the corporate part. My career started, as we'll be talking about, my career started with the corporate because my idea was to go to New York and work on Madison Avenue. If you wanted to be successful in advertising, you had to work on Madison Avenue.
Right.
Okay. And that's one of the reasons why I was so adamant about building a portfolio that I could go to an agency and convince them that it was real work. It wasn't a school project, So winning this contest, I got $500. They used my logo and, it was the spark that I needed to convince me that this is what I needed to do. I was good at it. I could make money at it. Okay. I could, aside from painting gas station windows, there's not a whole lot of gas station windows in Manhattan. Okay. So I ain't going to make a career out of painting gas station windows with Santa Claus and turkeys and stuff for different holidays in New York. So this was kind of another one of those those aha moments that you realize that, yeah, man, what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you want, you can get, you can do it. I competed against 2,000 people and I got it. I mean, it was like,
So that was your real first paying advertising job.
Yeah.
First gig, so to speak.
Yeah, so to speak. And then after that, I started freelancing for Walter Lander because I got I wasn't a student anymore. I was a professional. I did something that I got paid for, and the whole city is using it. That's pretty amazing.
That is incredible. Yeah, I can't wait to get to episode 2.
Yeah,
all about what.
Yeah, so
what he did in the corporate world. I mean, his things.
This part 1 has been a great opening for the series. It's going to take the audience from his childhood to all the way through college to his first paying job. And it sets the stage for going to New York from San Jose, California, all the way to New York to Madison Avenue, where he began his advertising career.
Yeah. Dionne Warwick and I were the only ones that knew the way to San Jose. That's for sure.
Right. So again, you are listening to Musicians and Beyond, and this is a special series with Ernie Cefalu called Under the Covers. And we have a multi-part series for you. Ernie, we want to thank you again for coming on.
The honor's mine, guys. I mean, really, for me, it's really exciting to talk about it because, I mean, and I hope that, your viewers feel the same way. I hope that, I can keep them entertained. I feel very confident, and obviously you guys do too, that there's some interesting stuff here, and it's going to get better as we go along. I mean, who starts out as a child prodigy? I certainly wasn't, but in a way I was. In a way I had this talent that I never realized.
We can't wait to hear about it.
Thank God you found your way.
I did. Yeah. Thank God I found my way. Thank God. Thank my parents. Thanks people like you guys, Mark and John, for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I mean, for me, and we're going to talk about it later, but we talked about Goldmine Magazine. For me, it's like, oh my God, the story is finally out there all in one place. And that's what this is going to be. The story, the complete story is going to be there from that birthday picture there in the nude to today, right now. We're going to tell that story. And